All right, welcome back to Module 8. In this module, we are going to be talking about pre-tenanting. So you have taken the process all the way through the deal spotter system from generating the lead, quick analysis, making an offer, getting your funding in place, through the long analysis, getting your inspector and your contractor there. You've now closed on the property and it's yours. So now what? That's what we're going to talk about in this module. But as usual, I've got to share the disclosure with you like we do at the beginning of every module. I'm not a licensed attorney, accountant, financial advisor, real estate broker, real estate agent, or any other licensed individual. Even if I had a license, I am not acting in that capacity. Therefore, I will not discuss or provide any specific counsel, advice, or instruction that would apply to specific individuals. This presentation is intended to be general information, and I recommend that you engage the services of professionals in making decisions that have a legal impact, especially financial decisions. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and dive in. So you own a rental property. Now what do I do? Well, let's talk about in this segment how to find renters, what types of bank accounts you should have in place, what to repair, what not to repair, who pays for those repairs, and screening your tenants. So here are some of the basics that you need to be aware of as we're digging into pre-tenanting your property. Remember always that cash flow is king. You should always make decisions based on cash flow, not based on emotion, not based on what your brother-in-law told you to do. Always make decisions based on cash flow. Be fair and consistent with all applicants and tenants. Always be prepared to defend yourself, and always assume that your tenant is a lawyer. All communication is in writing and sent via certified mail with proof of delivery. And we're going to talk about how to maximize your tax benefits. Now, let's talk about communication for a second. Remember that this is your business. Owning rental real estate is a business, and you have to be accountable for your own success. 99.9% of tenant problems are created because of a lack of effective communication of policies. Always look to improve your communication skills and your tools that you have at your disposal. The most important activity of a rental owner is what he or she communicates to tenants. Always communicate your expectations in writing. This should include policies and procedures, which creates a paper trail that allows you to easily back up your case if any type of dispute were to happen. Now remember, rental laws vary from state to state. While boilerplate template forms and letters do communicate universally sound business, marketing, and management concepts, certain notices or agreements may require special wording based on your state or locale. So make sure you understand your local Landlord-Tenant Act specific to your state. Now, a big part of pre-tenanting is marketing. We've got to go out and we've got to find those tenants. So you should already know a few things. You should already know the price that you're going to be renting out for. That should have been done in your quick analysis and confirmed in your long analysis before you even bought the property. You should know the demographic. This should follow your investor DNA that we talked about in an earlier module. Are you renting out to high-end tenants? Are you renting out to the mid-range, middle-class tenant? Or are you renting out to the low-end tenants? You should already know this. You should also know your lease length. Now, this is going to adapt based on your goals. So let's say, for example, you purchased a property subject to, and you know you have a 5-year balloon before you have to either pay it off, refinance it, or sell it. Let's assume that you're going to have to sell this property at the end of that term. You're going to want to adapt your lease length based on your exit strategy with the property. Let's say you bought a property subject to with a 5-year balloon. You might want to do two 2-year leases, which brings you to 4 years. And then the last lease, you do a 1-year lease option where the tenant then purchases the property from you after renting it from you for a year. This gets you out of the property in your 5-year balloon, and when set up from the beginning is a fantastic way to plan for that exit strategy. One of the things that I would recommend is never do a lease longer than 2 years. You may find after a year or a year and a half that your tenant is struggling. This is a perfect opportunity for you to reevaluate your relationship with the tenant, and you may decide as the landlord not to enter into a lease with that person again. When you have longer leases, such as 5-year or 10-year leases, it kind of forgoes that opportunity and you're stuck in that lease until that person decides to leave. So stick around that 2-year mark or less. You could do a 1-year lease or a 6-month lease, but I wouldn't go much longer than 2 years. As far as marketing goes, one of your most powerful tools is the internet. There are so many websites out there that are just a click away where you can advertise your property and attract tenants. You're going to want to put signage up in the neighborhood where the house is. Neighbors love picking their own neighbors, and a lot of times my tenants come from neighbor recommendations. Handouts, word of mouth, and paid services are also great ways to find tenants. You can use property managers or realtors to help with this process. Let's take a second and talk about repairs. Remember that these are rental properties. These aren't fix and flips. So you're not going to take the repairs to the top like you would on a fix and flip. These rental properties just have to be livable for the demographic that you're marketing to. Now, when it comes to repairs, it might be as little as a splash of paint and some new carpet, and it's ready to rent out. It might be a little more extensive. You should have already analyzed what needs to be done on this property and the costs associated with that in the quick analysis and long analysis phases. Once you have a property repaired and on the market, now it's time to decide what responsibilities are yours and what responsibilities are the tenants. Usually anything that's a fixture in the property, like cabinets, carpet, walls, appliances, those things are your responsibility. Anything that's perishable, like furnace filters or toilet paper or cleaning supplies, should be the responsibility of the tenant. As well as any damage caused by the tenant also falls under the category of being the responsibility of the tenant to fix. Now remember, as you're preparing this property for lease, weigh the differences between necessary and nice. You should just be getting this property to a point where it's livable, just the necessary items. So always ask yourself, as you're going to take on some additional work in the project, is this necessary or is this nice? Stick with the necessary. You can, however, do things that add value to the property. If it's going to appreciate your property and add value to it, if you have the budget for it, feel free to go ahead and add those things to the property. Also, keep in mind that there are certain things that are legally required. Certain emergency items like fire extinguishers are required in some states. Health and safety requires that your property be in a certain form of repair, and you can't have any sort of disrepair that creates a nuisance to the tenant. So keeping that in mind, be budget conscious about the repairs that you do to the property and just get it to that point where it's ready to move in. Now, on an ongoing basis, let's talk about some of the costs associated with owning a rental property and who is responsible to pay for those things. So with repairs, like we talked about in the last slide, if it's something that's necessary for health and safety, if there's a problem with the property that's causing a nuisance to the tenant, those are going to be your responsibility to pay for. However, the tenant is going to be responsible for any damage that they do to the property and any perishable items that need to be replaced. HOAs, this is negotiable. You can negotiate to have the tenant pay for your HOA. However, this does increase the overall cost of living and may push away some potential tenants. In some areas, there's neighborhood preservation fees. In some cases, it's appropriate to have the tenant pay for this. In others, it might be your responsibility. You need to be aware of those costs as you go into this investment. Who pays your monthly mortgage? Well, technically, you should have already run those numbers and make sure that the money that you're receiving from the tenant pays that mortgage on an ongoing basis. A lot of times, if you have a traditional mortgage in place, whether that's someone else's mortgage like the subject to strategy or traditional financing that you got on your own, usually property tax is escrowed into that payment. But make sure that you're aware whether it is or whether it's not, because if it's not escrowed into your monthly mortgage payment, you're going to need to make sure you pay that on a yearly basis. Maintenance could be something that you have to pay for, or in some cases, it might be something the tenant is responsible for. Like we've talked about before, any damage that the tenant causes to the property and any perishable items are the responsibility of the tenant. However, ongoing long-term maintenance of fixtures on the property, like heating, air conditioning, hot water, those are your responsibility as the landlord. Accessibility issues, you need to make sure that the property stays accessible. And also, when the tenant moves out, you need to be aware of what the costs are for marketing that property and getting it up to snuff so you can rent it out to the next tenant. A lot of times, those fees can be structured as a move-out fee if you've structured it properly. This will help you get it back on the market, do the little bit of rehab that needs to be done, and get it to that next tenant as quickly as possible. Now remember, if you've done your numbers correctly in your quick analysis and long analysis phase, a lot of the costs that are your responsibility should be covered in that 50% rule. Now let's talk about the maintenance process. It's important to inform tenants of all emergency and maintenance contacts. Don't put your name on that list. If the toilet gets clogged at 3 a.m, you don't want your tenants calling you. You want them calling your plumber. So make sure that they have a full list of all of the emergency and maintenance contacts and have a formal process to notify you. If you have it built into the lease process that they have to notify you when they reach out to a professional, that will make sure that you stay aware of what's going on with your property. Make sure your process includes the service providers who document the repairs. Follow up with the tenants after the repair is done and also 1 week later. Remember that there are laws about the landlord's right to enter. Each state has laws about giving tenants notice before entering, but this may differ from state to state, so make sure you understand your state's laws. Make sure you respect your tenant's rights and give them as much notice as possible. You need to serve your tenant with a notice of intent to enter at least 24 hours before entering the property, if not more, and that does vary from state to state. Also, they need to have signed a key release if the tenant is not present. Make sure you have those documents in place to protect you from a potential lawsuit. Now, once you're in the property, let's talk about the repairs process. Always get your tenant to confirm the repairs were made. And you want to do that in writing so that you have a paper trail if there's ever any dispute. You want to keep a rental repair receipt and file it in case it's later challenged in court. You're also going to want to determine who is at fault for maintenance problems. That should be indicated on your repair form. If the fault is with the tenant, bill your tenant for those repairs. Make sure that you keep as much of a paper trail as possible so that you can back up proof if needed. And along the lines of maintenance, it's important to have preventative maintenance measures in place. Inform your tenants on how best to maintain and safeguard their properties during the summer and winter seasons. It might be useful to provide a seasonal checklist for your residents, as well as instructions for preparation for colder weather. This must be in your lease or provided with the lease documents at the time of signing the lease. So that pretty much covers it for pre-tenanting. This has been Module 8. I'm looking forward to continuing with you in Module 9. We'll see you there.